I first wanted to introduce the topics we are covering today in this session. The strapline is remote working through the pandemic and beyond, with focus on VDI. But unless you already investigated in VDI, it can be many things for many people effectively. Primarily, it's replacing on-premise PCs. So that's a case of deploying either thin clients or converting existing PCs into thin clients. I've got a customer, they've converted 2,000 of their very old desktop computers into Linux thin clients, and they've gone from booting in minutes to seconds. That's one use case. Another one is remote working. So where actually staff members can actually easily work remotely that previously weren't able to do so. Remote learning for students, of course. Less perhaps of that, because a lot of the applications that students use nowadays are in Office 365, Microsoft 365, Teams and the like. But also, I guess maybe for student use as well, is accessing graphical applications like required for music, CAD, gaming and development. So they're kind of the four primary use cases of VDI, but they also include, say, the remote learning and remote working as well. The panelists today have got to use all of these use cases in different ways. Probably start with yourself, John. Perhaps you could provide a little bit of background to your college student mix and use of VDI.
Yeah, so I'm John Donnellan. I'm the Information Services Manager at Wigan and Leigh College. I head up both the IT and the MIS departments, but my background is more IT. So we're just entering the implementation stage of VDI, but we're quite a large college, quite a large student base, quite a lot of them remote learning even before the pandemic, and we looked at VDI as a method of closing the gap, really.
Okay, excellent. Probably same question to you, Iain, then, again, as a bit of background to the college student mix and use of VDI at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I'm Iain Stott. I'm from Preston College. I've been there for 27 years now, in various roles, but we have around 14,000 students in a normal year. This year is slightly different, but we do have a complete range from apprenticeship, 16 to 18 adults, the full range of what an FE college would deliver. We were very lucky, really, in the timing of our deployment. We looked at getting a complete new infrastructure around August 2019, and as part of that was the adoption of VDI. Now, initially, we were going to use VDI for converting some of our Macs into thin clients and divesting our Apple infrastructure. But just as we were getting the VDI up and running, we went into a national lockdown. So we then flipped it, and the VDI became the tool that enabled us for all our staff to work off-site. And they could therefore access the corporate systems that they were needed, the finance system, the HR system, student records. So really, VDI for us, the timing of it was very, very lucky, and it was the tool that enabled that smooth transition from being on campus to suddenly being off campus. So it's been a godsend, really, for us. So thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Same question to you, Paul. Same background to college student mix, use of VDI currently. Just a bit of a summary, I guess. That's okay.
Okay, thanks, Terry, and good morning to all of you out there as well. I hope this is going to be a useful discussion for you. I'm the head of IT services for South Devon College. I've been here for a little over 3 and a bit years now. Prior to that, most of my work experience has been either in large corporates or as a freelance virtualization consultant. So I kind of know the VDI piece from a technical level to begin with. The college itself, we've got about 10,000 learners on roll, and similar to Iain, that's a mix from kind of high school 14 to 16. A good proportion is the typical FE, We also have some HE. We've got a very, very strong apprenticeship cohort here across the southwest, and about 800 staff. Yeah, we've had VDI in place for coming up to 2 years now. And it was put in place really because of my past experience. I know the potential of this kit. I know how it can transform the kind of oldie worldy model, if you like, of this particular IT suite is the high-end stuff for CAD. This particular IT suite has the Adobe stuff on it, and these other IT suites have got lower spec machines just for kind of general work. So it was just to get away from that and to put a lot more flexibility into the use of spaces within the college.
Excellent, thank you. I know, John, you've only just recently, well, we're currently in the deployment of the VDI remote working solution, but what prompted you to look at VDI in the first place, and what products did you investigate as part of that review? Because that'd be interesting as to why you chose the products that you did choose.
Well, I think there's a number of reasons why we started looking at VDI. I mean, the pandemic's kind of like, we started looking at it before then, but it's just made it so much clearer because it fits in so nicely. I mean, like you said, Paul, flexibility around college is a big issue. Oh, you know, this room, you've got some problem with the room, so you can't go in there. Where can I move my AutoCAD class? Oh, we don't have any AutoCAD rooms available, because you know, you've got that fixed resource that's just available in those rooms. So VDI gives us that flexibility. In terms of teaching those classes as well, remotely and on less powerful hardware, because you know, in Wigan we do have a mixed group of students, different backgrounds, and in terms of ensuring that no one is left behind, we want to make sure that all those students working remotely on any kit they've got at home, or even if we can provide them with a piece of kit, that they're able to access those applications, and VDI is going to let us do that. Finance came into it. We've got the cost of the thin clients is lower than your normal PCs, for want of a better word, and they're going to last longer. Like all colleges, we've got a big movement to reduce our carbon, which VDI is going to help us with. More efficient management. So I'm sure like everybody, we all wish we had a bigger team, and we're all under pressure to manage, you know, a massive estate. So in terms of best utilizing that team's time, VDI is going to improve that, because we've got much less, you're managing the estate in a more efficient way, because you're just managing a small number of images. A great example is Windows updates. You're not dealing with 1,000 PCs anymore. You're dealing with 3 images. So I see that as a great move forward. So I think they were the main reasons, really. But I think primarily it was student focused, to ensure that no one got left behind, and that flexibility in college of being able to teach in different areas, so you're not being tied to a room anymore.
What about different technologies that you reviewed or looked at as part of the investigation into which deployment VDI platform we should actually use?
Yeah, we looked at a few things really in the beginning. We looked at Amazon Web Services, we looked at Microsoft VDI, and we felt that they were still rooted in remote desktop. You were still essentially having remote machines running in the background that was still more resource heavy than this. So we kind of quickly settled on VMware as our route forward, and we're quite happy.
So same question to you, Paul, I guess then. So what caused you to start looking at VDI as a solution, and also how it has helped during the pandemic? So obviously that's one of the reasons why we're here.
Yeah, VDI for us, well, from my perspective at least, was always going to be VMware based. In my experience, since I first worked with ESX back in 2004, I think, It's always been a rock solid piece of technology. The reliability's there, the product maturity's there, and that kind of puts it head and shoulders, I think, still above what Microsoft can offer in that space. The Horizon product line particularly is brilliant. The fact that you can use grid as well, and I'm sure that's something that Simon will come on to, and particularly with regards to educational licensing, which opens up even more possibilities at a good price point. So it was always going to be that VMware stack, and yeah, having made that choice, there were some big challenges that we needed to overcome. I don't want to go into huge depth there, otherwise I'll be talking all morning. But the biggest thing was just making sure that my team were prepared for it, because it is a very different support model to the traditional siloed IT world. You know, when you're looking at troubleshooting issues, you've got to be holistic across the whole stack end to end, and not just focus in one particular area. So like I say, I'll kind of stop there rather than just ramble on for another half an hour.
The other day when we chatted, you said that VDI was, excuse me, a lifesaver. So what do you mean by that? Or could you
yeah, you know, we had VDI in place before lockdown happened, and at that point we were using it nearly completely internally, and similar to John's comments earlier, once lockdown happened, we flipped it quite quickly so that staff that needed to access internal systems could come in through VDI rather than a very old and clunky RDS solution that we had in place. But again, similar to what John was saying, it enabled students to connect to higher end resources than they might necessarily have at home. We've got that very broad range as well, with quite a lot of poverty down here, so people can't necessarily get hold of that kit, and it's all about giving them that access. So VDI has really helped staff that have needed to get into college for systems that we don't expose externally, financial systems, a lot of our dashboards, but primarily for the learners who still need to be able to keep learning. And we've just been able to say, there you go. And it's just worked beautifully for us.
Excellent. So Iain, I suppose one for you is there, as far as you're concerned, what were the big wins from VDI that you've seen during the pandemic?
The big wins for us, it did enable that seamless shift really, and we did thrust it on staff and students with very little training, and it was very easy for them to pick up with just simple instructions. The security around it, because obviously we did have an extranet solution which we had issues over security and the number of people that could use it. This kept that identity and that logging in as being king really. The pushing out of new bits of software in the golden image, updating software. When you've got people working on laptops, in the olden days, you'd have to get them to bring those laptops back in to make sure everyone had the correct version of the software. With the VDI, it was very easy. When we got a software update, we'd just update it in the golden image, and then next time someone logged in, everyone would have it. And we would do that sometimes during the middle of the day. So all our software was up to date. It also, in a way, sandboxes what they're doing, so they're not doing stuff on the actual laptop, which gives them some extra reassurance. And yeah, the security of it was a big one on top of what both John and Paul have said for us. But yeah, that was the extra.
Sorry, interesting one. This one is that obviously sometimes users or IT managers are a bit apprehensive about using VDI, but from an end the point of view, what's the feedback been like? What is the user experience when working remotely? Because obviously that's going to be a consideration. If it's poor and non-responsive, then people won't use it. So have you had any feedback about the actual, what it's like to work remotely using a VDI?
The feedback from our end users has been overwhelmingly positive. Once we first switched it on, there were a few users who needed a bit of additional support compared to others, but overall feedback has been really positive. We were looking at it as well to support the use on any device. The one bit that I think we still need to really box off is its use on tablets, because it can be used, it's not quite the same experience as if you were on a laptop. So you wouldn't want to do a whole day's work in the VDI on an iPad, for instance. But that's been the feedback we've received from users. But yeah, it's been overwhelmingly positive. And what it has done is it means that now we're coming back on campus and we're going to be using the VDI in other ways around the campus. That adoption of it will be far more, be far easier.
The same be a question for you, Paul, I guess then. So, I think I've a round robin of user experience. Has yours been the same, your users?
By and large, yeah. Very similar story to Iain. Some users have needed a little bit more support. But what we found is that before lockdown, we'd put together our digital transformation strategy where we were looking for more flexible working over the next kind of 3 years. One of the biggest concerns we had with that was how quickly people could get up to speed, knowing that some people take to this stuff without any prompting whatsoever, and at the other end you've got some people who need a lot of support and a lot of reassurance. But what we found once the pandemic fully kicked in is that people just got on with it, and I think that says more to people being able to trust technology more to actually just work for them. So, from experiences from previous years, things have always had that kind of fingers crossed that it'll work. And for sure, things haven't been 100%, but I think people have been pleasantly surprised that things have been more stable than they were necessarily expecting. And that's kind of helped them build that confidence to be able to use it and know that it's going to work for them.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So, Paul, that's great from an end user point of view. What about the desktop support team? Because obviously they presumably had to learn a new set of skills. Did they take that on board, and was it easy to persuade them to move to a VDI, or have they found it difficult? Has it released their time and improved their job satisfaction?
All of the above, really. The traditional model of having people going to desk side visits hasn't disappeared, but that's diminished quite a lot now, where we have got the Wise Thing clients deployed. Those things just work. You really don't need to worry. The staff have pretty much embraced the new technology. Pretty much like all IT staff, they love learning new things. So for them, it's a bonus to be able to kind of get up to speed with some newer technology. It's been very challenging because we've had to juggle that around all the business as usual support work, but they've really taken to it. It's not reduced the staffing, but it has kind of raised the skill levels of the people who are there. It's also made it a lot easier to respond quite quickly to things like sessions that need restarting, rather than have to either remote onto a PC that's not responding too brilliantly, or even run down and try and find the right building and the right room to do the hands-on piece that would have been there previously. So it's also freed up more time, particularly with the hardware refresh programs that we run during the summer, which is probably similar to what you guys have to deal with, where you'd have replaced several hundred PCs each summer. We would typically have had some casual workers come and join us for that, really just to lift and shift kit, recable. We don't have to do that now. The refresh, if you like, is adding in 1 or 2 new hosts, maybe swapping out some more thin clients or converting some PCs to be a thin client. So it's a lot less physical labor, and it saves a hell of a lot of time, which really needs to be factored into the cost model and the business case when you're looking to put this in place to begin with.
Mm. Yeah, but anecdotal information. I mean, one of my other college customers has said they've converted 2,000 PCs into Linux thin clients, and they had lecturers saying, "Why is my classroom booting so slowly when the next door classroom boots in seconds?" And they hadn't understood the fact that the VDI deployment was actually rolling classroom by classroom. So effectively, that was the difference, that one was booting thin clients into the VDI environment, the other one was still just booting all PCs up, and it was taking minutes. So, Paul, sorry, one for John. I understand that you're also purchasing Wise Thin clients. So, what was the reason behind that, and is that a strategy going forward to replace PCs with thin clients?
Yeah, I mean that's the direction the college has chosen to take now. We decided to go with the Wise Thin clients, but also from a remote working point of view, we'll continue to, allow students to use the Horizon client on their own devices or on devices that we can give them. But in college now, as a policy, we'll be rolling out the Wise Thin clients. We've just purchased a lot of the 5070s. So while we're still in the implementation phase and testing, we're testing with a 5070. It's all going well so far.
Right. One of my college customers, they've just got some funding for some Wise Thin clients, so generally. So I don't know any details about that one, but those funding opportunities are out there, so it all helps, doesn't it? Really. The one for John, really, I suppose, in that we touched on Nvidia GPUs before. I know that in your new environment, you've purchased Nvidia GPUs. So, what was the reason behind that purchase, and what do you intend? What is the use case for those Nvidia GPUs?
Well, we have a high number of CAD engineering students because we've got a high number of apprenticeships. We've got a campus that's almost dedicated to engineering. And as I touched on earlier, we've always had this problem where you've got your 8 CAD rooms, and if something happens in there, you've got no option. And the pandemic gave us a massive issue in terms of dealing with that, teaching those subjects from home. So when we were looking at VDI and we were looking at how we could deal with both the AutoCAD and our arts, we've got another arts campus. So in terms of our Adobe Premiere Pro and whatnot, and how we're gonna roll out that solution via VDI, and through various meetings and whatnot, we settled on it on Nvidia, and we've gone for some high-end VxRail with some pretty powerful Nvidia cards in, which I think should run Photoshop okay. So yeah, we're quite confident that this is going to meet our needs.
Excellent. So Paul, I know you've got Wise Thin clients. I know in the old days, users used to hate having their PCs removed. So have you had any pushback with replacing desktop computers with Wise Thin clients, or has everybody been happy with it?
It's been relatively straightforward. It's been about convincing them more than anything. People have their tried and tested methods of working, and if there's any kind of change coming for that, the biggest concern is, what's that going to mean? Is it going to be as good? Particularly for teaching staff who are up in front of a classroom full of learners, is the technology going to be stable so that they can kind of get through their lesson without having everything fall in a heap? The Wise terminals, as I said before, have been absolutely brilliant. Wise have been around for years before Dell bought them, and their kit is just bomb-proof. It just works. You don't need to have any kind of concerns whether it's going to fail. We went for the 3040s rather than the 5070s. The pixels that we're moving in our sessions didn't really require anything higher powered. So with those being passively cooled as well, those are even better in terms of stability, lack of heat output, which again plays into the green credentials. But yeah, people were a little nervous to begin with, but once they saw the experience was good enough for them, they were quite happy.
I've got a customer, they give their users a choice. It's a council one, it's not college, but they get the users a choice whether they want a thin client or a desktop PC. Initially, everybody was choosing PCs, but then they found out that the performance was such as good, if not better, using the thin clients. They all started voting with their feet and requesting thin clients now. So it's an interesting change, isn't it, that people now accept the fact that technology is getting smaller and faster, and they want the fastest. They don't care what it looks like anymore. Iain, I know the VDI deployment was part of a much larger IT infrastructure refresh. Do you have any advice, guidance about getting budgets and how it was financed?
Yeah, and can I just add to that last point as well? Because one of the things that we are trialing at the moment is removing desktops and actually having staff only having a laptop. So we've got a small cohort of staff who will literally come into college. They'll have a docking station if they want an extra monitor, but they're going to be using their laptop at home and also on site. So they won't actually have a desktop or a thin client. So the thin client basically becomes a laptop. But that's one model that we're looking at to move everything. So it is completely flexible and mobile. Obviously that won't work for students in classrooms in the same way, but it is something that we're looking at for staff. But back to your question about financing. For us, we were putting an IT strategy in place, and it became apparent that a lot of the objectives within the IT strategy were going to be reliant on us getting a new infrastructure because our existing infrastructure was aging. So that they became very intrinsically linked, really. But we needed to look at all the options that were out there as part of the due diligence that we needed to do. And we did end up going with Dell VX Rails, and we replaced all our edge access and core infrastructure at the same time. So it was a big project. And the VDI was really this additional bonus that wasn't necessarily one of the first priorities, because we just needed a data center that wasn't going to break down and provide the consistency of service and meet the increasing demands of students and staff, really. But when it came down to the financing, obviously it's a large sum of money, but the costs, the savings that we were making, especially when you start talking about thin clients and VDI and not replacing a lot of the hardware, you've got savings on energy power. And the one thing I will say about the VX Rails, it did give us that scalability and that predictability on budgeting. So I could provide a budget forecast for the next 5 years on everything from the hardware to support to maintenance. And that then provided the basis for, this is what it was going to cost us if we don't do anything, this is what it will cost us if we do this, and this is what it will cost us if we do that. But Dell financing as well is a very good option that's out there and can make things a lot more affordable. And that swayed it for some of our finance people who were skeptical about suddenly having to find a large chunk of money in the cash flow. But yeah, that's how we did it. But to get it through our board who needed to approve it, we literally had to break down all the different options and then what the cost would be, what the savings would be, what if we did nothing, what the risks were, and that's how we got it through, really. But it was a big investment, but it has definitely paid its dividends, and nobody at the college is now sat there going, well, I can't see any cost benefits of that, because they realise that it would have cost us a fortune to do something very last minute at the start of the pandemic. So it's definitely paid for itself, and we're only 2 years into it, having it.
Again, John, I know you're new to the platform, as you were, but what prompted you to choose a Dell platform over any other vendor's platform? Why choose Dell, I guess?
Well, when I joined the college, I suppose we did kind of start moving more towards Dell, because I think we had a bit of a myriad of different technologies, different suppliers throughout college. So I wanted to kind of settle on consistency. So we were moving more towards Dell, and I was building that relationship. And when I then got in touch with Dell as a first port of call about VDI, they then put me in touch with Nviron. And so you know, we were evaluating the other technologies at the same time, but we settled on Horizon, and that was kind of the technology that was put to me, really. So I can't really go into too much detail why we chose it over something else. That was just the solution that we were proposing, and I was happy with it, and you know, it's working out well. You know, working with Dell and Andy at Nviron, you know, been nothing short of brilliant working with us. So
excellent, thank you. And Paul, the same question, I suppose. I mean, I know yours is a bit of a it was a bit of a starter VDI solution, wasn't it? Budget constraints at the time, but do you plan to expand on it? You know, has it been such a success that you will be increasing its usage in the future?
Yeah, yeah, it was very much a question of trying to work out how we could kit out an entire new high-tech and digital building. We'd approached a lot of the kind of tier one vendors, likes of Dell, Fujitsu, HP, Lenovo. We got very, very good engagement right from the outset with Dell. They put us in touch with Nviron to work with us on the design and just make sure that everything was there. But in terms of choosing Dell, what really sealed it for us was Dell's a known high quality brand, and the pricing that they gave us was extremely competitive. So it was a bit of a no-brainer, and to be honest, nobody else could compete with it. We started off with only 2 hosts with some direct attached storage to an SC3020, so you know, fairly small scale. We've since added 2 more hosts, so we're up to the limits of direct attach now. We've got I think a little over 200 seats at the moment, which again is relatively small scale, but the plans are to extend that further, and to just over time get rid of all of our fixed traditional desktops, unless there are very specific situations where we can't do that.
I suppose a general panel question, this one. What capabilities of service do you see in the future? What plans are you making for that? You know, do you see technologies going or remote workings going? Do you have particular requirements that aren't out there, or do you see new technologies coming in? Who's going to take that one first? Anybody?
It's a very interesting time at the moment in technology. There's still the onward push to cloud-based rather than on-premise. That's something that we're looking at. Timings and costs could be a little bit difficult. We're also still dealing with the fallout from Brexit and where we can host things now. And I know that I looked at this last year, and Microsoft were having some capacity issues with being able to provide enough Azure space in the UK. I don't know whether that's the case now. I've not had a chance to revisit that recently, but Yeah, it's about the cloud. It's about the access anywhere from any time on any device. And in terms of what technology that falls down to, I think it's important from us as leaders and strategists to actually keep things at a fairly high level, so that if a big change happens or if a disruptor product comes out of nowhere, we're not so tied into one particular chain that we can't take that turning and really leverage something new. Having said that, the flip side is that the players like Dell, VMware, Nviron, Nvidia have already got that kind of flexible capability there. So they're not going to be disappearing anytime in the near future. So the investment that we've made is still good. And I think that'll just scale out further, whether it's scaling more on-premise for tactical things where you need that short latency, or hosting it somewhere else.
I know you, John, you looked at cloud at the time, didn't you? Did you see, I know you made a decision at the time not to move to a cloud platform. Do you see cloud being in your strategic future? Well, it's got to be in everybody's strategic future, isn't it, really, I guess? But
I think
why
it's to what degree, isn't it?
the cloud, I guess. Yeah.
I suppose it wasn't that it was. I think there was an element where we wanted to kind of retain a bit more control than you have when you go with something that's cloud-based. And we have that feeling with, it wasn't just VDI, we have that feeling throughout college. But I think in terms of what we're looking to do over the next few years is just really embed VDI over the next year, really. And similar to what Iain said, we've tried to move away from a situation where the colleges ended up providing multiple devices to people, where staff have a laptop and we're going to use that with Horizon, and then they dock it when they come into work. So VDI will help drive that. So I suppose it's a process of consolidation, and really kind of taking more control of the infrastructure is our kind of objective moving forward now. But yeah, I suppose in terms of cloud, it wasn't, we didn't really discount it primarily because it was cloud. In terms of choosing Horizon over them was more because we felt they were rooted in RDS.
Right.
But like you say, cloud, you know, your infrastructure or your services are going to go, if you measured it every year, there'll be more cloud. It's inevitable.
Iain, you have anything to add to that?
I was going to say one of the things, it's partially because I am a data junkie really, but one of the things that I am starting to look at really is some of the analytics behind the use of the learner and staff use of the VDI, and it's understanding that engagement and actually what we can interpret from the back end of a lot of these systems, and that's the way that we as an organisation will then learn, and it will also direct our priorities going forward. And the thing about the infrastructure we've got is that it is scalable, so we can expand and retract as required. But that is one of the things that now we've got it in place, and now we're going to start returning to normal, looking at that, looking at the analytics really to actually understand how people are engaging and what they're using within it, which is very difficult to do when you've got all the software sat on individual laptops. So that's really the bit that is our next bit to explore. But it's providing a platform, as the others have said, that is going to be fit for purpose and will support the needs and demands that we all know are coming in the next few years. And it's that flexibility really. Flexibility and scalability were one of the things that sold it to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think the VDI breaks the link between the device and the session almost, because the device can be anywhere, can't it, really? And it's also, you've got a known fixed cost with the on-premise kit, you can easily expand it, and it's a known expense, whereas a cloud, it just kind of often can be a lot more expensive, can't it, really? Yeah, and usage can go up and down easily when on-premise and less so in the cloud, I guess. So interesting. Well, I think that's perfect timing. Thank you all very much, the panelists, time and insight into their remote working and learning platforms. Feel free if you want to speak to any of our panelists. We can always be helpful and able to provide references and chats regarding their environment and how their experiences regarding it.
I've just got a few slides to talk about some computing trends and some aspects and views from Nvidia. Okay, so as we've heard this morning, the visual computing trends that we're seeing is pretty much reinforcing the theme that addressing future market demands, VDI is pretty much key to doing exactly that. We've seen the visual computing requirements just really grown massively amongst this huge shift that we've had to have as a result of the pandemic to remote working. Having professionals who are already looking to turn to more powerful mobile solutions and more powerful remote work solutions, and having to tackle that kind of workload from home, or even delivering pre-pandemic continuity of work from the office, no matter what their work environments were. In a student field, there's so much time is spent off the campus, carrying on with the students' work, and having the ability to utilize VDI to that endeavor, in particular with those higher, as we'll call them, those higher workloads, has been a real key driving point. What we're seeing at the moment is thin and light notebooks. You've heard a lot talk there about thin clients, and I've got quite an extensive background in both VDI and thin client, working as I have done with a number of different vendors there. But we're seeing thin and light notebooks now being forecasted to have the highest number of shipments among any PC devices in 2023. And within that, we would accommodate thin client devices. We're seeing well in excess now of employees will likely to be working remotely in a hybrid space after the pandemic's moved on. So I think in a recent poll, over 70% said that they prefer to have that hybrid work arrangement. And we're already seeing, I speak to a number of NHS trusts, they're making a standard to say maybe 2 days in the office and flexibly, and then other days working remotely. So Nvidia's technology, GPU technology, is really enabling the workforce to improve productivity and have that great user experience that you would expect when working on campus. With a GPU accelerated VDI or accelerated VDI, as we perhaps refer to it more frequently now, it's enabling IT to meet that increasing graphics demand that the modern digital workplace, and of course Windows 10 and its heavy resource requirements, it's enabling them to become more graphics rich environments and meet the demand of that. It's enabling rapid provisioning of new virtual workstations, as opposed to building that physical aspect. And from my perspective, I cover both physical and virtual. At the moment, there's a heavy leaning towards the virtualizing of workstation. And I might add that we can, as you'll see in a couple more slides later, we can extend the capability of the virtual workstation easily now to meet that of the physical one. And giving access to pretty much any application, data from anywhere on any device, and securing that data whilst giving that same great user experience. So, we can now enable the geographically dispersed to collaborate in real time, no borders, no limits. And again, as we get to the end of the day, you'll see some even more interesting ways and means of collaborating in real time. So the performance from the data center and of course the cloud, we've mentioned the cloud a few times this morning. Those solutions have been around for a long time, but often the end user experience has not been the greatest in the world. Users are used to having a physical device with a GPU inside. You buy any kind of PC or workstation, and that comes with a GPU inside. But then when they become virtualized, at one point there was no GPU at all in the server, and obviously when Nvidia came along with grid technology, we introduced the means of delivering GPU capability onto those virtual desktops as well. So this meant that rather than the VDI platform being dependent on CPU, which would easily become overburdened and you know, under-resourced, shall we say. The vGPUs introduced into this mix, and typically any tasks that can be offloaded to the GPU will be done, and that results in a much better user experience, and therefore many more users can be supported on the platform. So we work with one of our partners, a company called Lakeside Software, and they wrote a white paper on our behalf, and we will enable a link. There's a link available to this white paper. I'm not sure if the slides are being distributed. What Lakeside found and proved is that GPU usage by productivity apps has more than doubled since 2015, and that continues to develop. The number of productivity apps that uses GPU resources is now pretty much on 100%, and you know, that includes those applications you wouldn't expect, the office productivity there, you know, PowerPoint, Office, Word, Excel, and so on. So that's meant that what we've done is introduced a GPU to deliver on any and every workload. And I'm working here from the most recently announced. So at the left-hand side of the scale, we would have normally seen our Nvidia M10 card. That's now being superseded by A16 with twice the amount of power, where we can see a significantly higher number of users being delivered on that platform, potentially up to 192 users with 3 of the GPU cards. Now that's all about density. That's all about office productivity, streaming videos, some lightweight Adobe application environments. And then as we move up the field, we look at the T4, which is our entry level to CAD, which is soon to be replaced by the A10 again. So you know, we've got mid-range capability there for ray tracing, capability for AI and inferencing. So we can talk about mixed workloads, and there's a phrase we use called the VDI by day, compute by night, and that's where, as we extend, and there was some talk there from the panelists about how else we can start to use these platforms, and AI and development technology there is perhaps one of those ways. And then we run right the way at the other end of the scale to the A40, which is our highest capable graphics, virtualization graphics card, delivering some fantastic environments around media and entertainment, around the computer-aided engineering, seismic exploration, and so on. And then further up the field, the A100 and A30 are all about AI and high-end virtual compute. And of course, we can virtualize compute elements as well and deliver virtual data science workstations. Some of the software features we talk about there, and I think it was alluded to by Paul at South Devon, was talking about the capabilities of the virtual workstation license. In education, we do deliver some heavy discounts to make the highest capability available. So you know, at every level, we can deliver on Linux OS, we can deliver the Windows OS, obviously. We've got capabilities for multiple displays. We've got capabilities for extremely high frame buffer profiles, and frame buffer is the way we deliver the visual capability out to each individual workstation. So we can give as high as a 48 gigabyte GPU availability, even in a virtual platform, to a concurrent user. Or we can go down as low as a 1 gigabyte user platform, and of course drive in numbers of different screens. So you know, you can see all that capability there. What I've not shown there too much beyond the AI enterprise is we're talking about virtualized compute, and I'll not drill down into that today because that gets far more complicated than the time would allow us today. So as I said, virtual GPU software, you know, it gives us the ability to deliver on a number of different environments, whether that's standard office productivity, and that's where we'll use virtual PC software, whether that's virtual applications, when we start to think about application streaming, we do actually support the RDSH and the terminal server type environments, all the way through to the high-end capability of ray tracing on virtual workstation. That's very high performance graphics, enabling us to create, you know, the latest blockbusters in the media world, or to visualize some scientific developments. Okay, so with the portfolio of software that we have, we can address different users, different workspaces, different application sets. The creative and technical people make greater demands as they develop their skill set. So when we look at users of Autodesk products like CAD, 3ds Max, Maya, and so on, they are absolutely the high end of virtual workstation. But of course, we also look at the Creative Cloud from Adobe, and we do sit that sometimes in the knowledge worker side. But of course, it very much plays hard into the creative field too. So the demands of those applications can sometimes make a minimum footprint of an 8 GB GPU frame buffer, and therefore we're driving forward on a workstation. But as you can see there, different application sets can make different demands. The number of Zoom and Teams and WebEx type meetings we have, we've now proved our technology. There's a number of slides and other collateral available to show the ability that we give you and the enhanced ability we give you visually, as well as density around those WebEx meetings. I mentioned earlier about the power of the A16 in density now. So as we move forward, the platform will come available mid-July, and that's where we now have the ability to support 192 users with only 3 GPUs. Whereas previously on the M10, it's the previous generation card, we would have only supported 96 users with that same platform. So as you can see, that's very, very high density. That's delivering a 1 GB frame buffer for those office productivity workers and general environments. So a fantastic platform and delivering great, very broad capability on that. So just reiterating now, we always make recommendations, and this is how to approach accelerated VDI, and that's to try and separate your user spaces into knowledge worker, creative and tech professional, and then of course AI type worker. And that will lead you to the appropriate license and lead you to the recommended GPU that we might have. So starting at that knowledge worker, A16, M10, or perhaps T4, and then all the way across to perhaps RTX 8000 or A40, driving those creative and technical professionals, again, depending on that workload. So there's a huge amount of resource available. If you want to know more about virtual GPU, if you go on to Nvidia.com and follow the different paths outwards, there's an element there about GTC. That's our global technology conference. There's a whole host of session replays talking about accelerated VDI, talking about Omniverse, is something I'll briefly mention next, and of course links to our free trial licenses that are available that will help you build out those test drives. Now, what I'm going to show next on this pretty much next slide is a recent announcement from Nvidia. This is called Omniverse, and it's all about visualizing collaborative workloads. So we use this technology to connect and work with different users. You'll see different screens going on there, and so this video will run through quite quickly, and I've actually no control on it. But what we're talking about here, in fact, if you just pause the video for a moment, what we're talking about there is that ability. So I hold the slide deck there, that's fine. What we're talking about there is the ability to work with a number of different users in a number of different locations. Now, from a university or further education campus, this could be students working from home or working from different campuses, or collaboratively working with other universities and colleges, whereby they will each see a visual output that they're all working on, even though they're working on independent applications. That one, okay, and press play on that. So what we've got here is 2 different scenarios showing remote collaboration, where we've got 2 locations there, and we've got individuals using motion capture technology to visualize. Now, what you've got in the central screen is the Omniverse output. And what you've got on the left-hand and the right-hand screens are the individuals working collaboratively, but in separate locations. The output, they will both see the same output that we're seeing there in the center of the screen. So what we're doing here is working in our workshop, but we're creating the idea and the visual recreation of walking on the moon. Even though we're just walking around in a specific workshop, what we're seeing is being rendered real time. So as those individuals are walking about in their own workshop workspace, the rendering is happening real time, and that's down to the power of those RTX cards. Now, what this might be is this could easily be a set design. If you're working in that creative arts where you've got a lighting designer, you can pause the video now. You've got a lighting designer, you've got a props designer, and you've got a prop manager or theatre manager, and you might want to change the lighting cues to see a different visualization on the set. You just sort of say the word and that happens, and you all see that visual output. Taking that to its greatest extent, we're working with BMW, we're working with WPP. BMW are going to use Omniverse to help restructure their production. They're already working on that. Their expectation is that being able to create a digital twin, which is what this is all about, will help them restructure their production and reduce their cost by around 25%. So literally anything that is an object that can be designed will be designed and digitized in Omniverse. Anything that moves will be automated in Omniverse so that they can recreate their entire factory flow within this Omniverse space, within this digital twin. They can model new scenarios before they then build the physical world. We can apply the same idea to a digital twin of a city, where we can analyze and model what would happen within that city if we should have heavy rainfall and a flood should occur, so that we can then build out how we might meet and head-on disasters exactly like that. Very, very powerful tool. It's available today in public beta, and it works and drives either from a virtual workstation or from a physical workstation. So this is just a snapshot of where technology is actually moving today. So I'll hold it there and come back. But this is the where vGPU, where virtualized computing really starts to kick in with some heavy power and heavy availability.